Welcome to the Cure for Stupidity podcast, an ongoing exploration of the stupidity in real life, relationships, parenting, and more.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome back to another episode of the Cure for Stupidity podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Another late night episode. Not as late night as the last one.
This is not late night. This is just post-bedtime for the kids.
Post-bedtime.
Not late night. But it is a good productive time for us, and we know there's no distractions, interruptions, doorbells ringing from Amazon packages or anything in between.
Or contractors walking into the house
it's
randomly.
Good. Yeah, it's a good time.
So this week we're going to talk about context, and the principle is context is the underlying fabric by which we interact with the world or we encounter the world, and that's a really interesting principle because we spend so much time of our lives focusing on the content of things that we don't realize how much the context has to do with it. Mm-hmm. So think of things like body language or even what I was thinking. That means I love you.
Oh yeah, clearly.
That's the story I'm telling myself. But like thinking about how we talked about driving. Driving's a big thing for me. I like driving and stories about driving. But like, you're driving down the road and hey, which way should we go? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to take surface streets. You're like, why would we take surface streets?
Recalculating,
right? It's like, well, like the context that I didn't share is that I got into a car accident on the freeway. I got rear-ended late at night. That's a true story. I'm not afraid to drive on freeways, but I may choose to drive on surface streets because of that context, that meaning underneath it. And I think a lot of times we don't share meaning, like we in general, we just don't share meaning. We share the information, we share the context, we try to prove with data
and dig our heels in.
We don't really get into here's why I'm feeling this way.
I would never do such a thing ever.
Right.
Recalculating.
I mean, by like never, do you mean like never?
Yeah, I mean, all right. Whatever. It was a joke.
No. But it happens, and all of us. And I think so in the relationship, I'm an introvert and Jamie is an extrovert, and I find that a lot of times I don't share a lot. Like I don't share the meaning. I don't share I don't share anything.
And I feel like I way over-explain myself, which now I'm starting to see as fight to be right, because I will extrovert all of the logic and reasoning and thought process that I went to in gymnastics, mental gymnastics that I went through to get to that decision. And you're like, all right, got it. And it's like, oh, was I trying to justify and prove? And was I trying to oversell or whatever, my way of doing something? And then there's so many other times where I won't tell you all the stuff that I've been through. And those are where, we get into sticky situations, right?
I think like specifically in those situations where I get annoyed is when you, like you said, like oversell. Like you say, here's the thing. And the times when you hold back, the thing that's missing is why you actually care. And like why it matters in the first place. That's usually what I'm missing. And I think that's that difference between the content and the context. And it's like, it's not that to the example with the putting together the desk and me deciding to put it, like, let's have a conversation about it. But what you were saying was I was up all night every night and here's the information, and the context under it was, Eric, I've deeply thought about this and I feel that you don't trust me.
Okay. All right. So tomorrow morning at 7 a.m.
Yes.
We have our new flooring going in.
Yes.
And tonight, we still need to make a decision on how the tile is going to be laid.
Yes.
Give me your context and help me.
Okay. This is great.
Figure out, because you're the design guy with your, undergrad degree in web design.
Yeah.
And I'm the project manager.
You are definitely the project manager.
I totally feel like I'm just doing it the way that I think it should be done.
Yeah.
And so
this is going to be a live example of this. So we're laying like long plank style tiles, and so wood looking plank style tiles. Yeah. So like 6 inches wide, but maybe 24 inches long. And there are options of how you lay them. So you can lay them kind of all stacked like this, which...
Wait. We've already agreed on which direction they're laid, right?
Yes, yeah.
Long ways, not wide.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, we're all going
clear?
from the front door long ways.
No changes there.
No changes there.
Cool.
No.
I agree.
We've agreed on that.
Okay.
So once you have the direction, then there's 3 different ways you can lay it. You can lay it, all
probably
side
like
by side.
100 ways to lay.
Right.
3
that we're choosing
was
from.
recommended to us.
3 we're choosing from. So think about like subway tiles, right? So they're just all kind of stacked, all like bricks, very clean and organized. We're not doing it that way because why would we do it that way?
Okay. Clean, organized?
No, we're not doing that.
Sounds up my alley.
So the remaining 2 we have to choose from are half on half. So you have one plank here, and then about halfway up it, you start the next plank, and then you kind of go like that, and the whole thing is kind of offset by 1. There's actually a couple more. So then there's offset by a third. So at the third mark, you start another one, boom, and then over you start a third.
And that'll always be the same all the way across?
Always be the same all the way across. Okay. So the way that our space is we have, so I'm giving information now. This is the information portion of it, right? So we can have all the information, and then we'll get to context. So we're in content now. So when you do it that way, right, you have this kind of stair step that goes across the entire floor diagonal.
When you do it in thirds or halves or
when you
both?
Do it in both. So halves, it's very, much more jagged, more long, but thirds, it's like this. But then you see these diagonal zigzags all the way across. The last way to do it is to do it what's called random. And so at random, sometimes it's a third, sometimes it's a half, sometimes it's a fifth. And so the lines, it ends up feeling more like a natural hardwood floor. And so my preference is to go with the random style because when you walk in the front door, we have, 16 feet across all the way through the formal dining room and then all the way through to the living room. So it could look like, because I think we went with a little bit lighter grout, but not super light, but a little lighter than the tile. Mm-hmm. So what it would look like is these zigzags going this way, and that becomes a design feature where you see zigzags going diagonally across the floor.
But once you get furniture down, are you even going to see it?
I think so, because when you first walk in, there's no furniture. So anyway, the context is, in my mind, I envision seeing the grout more than seeing the tile.
But I think we switched to a dark enough grout that it's really not going to be that visible because we went with truffle. Okay. That's pretty dark.
We did go with pretty dark, but it's lighter than the tile.
It is lighter, and
so it will show up.
But it's still much darker than where we started.
It is. So my idea is to go with the random so that the grout lines there isn't a pattern to the grout lines, and the tile shows up. That's my entire thought. I'm not super sold on it. I just think I would like that better. But I want to know what you think and why you care for one of the other options.
I'm leaning towards half or thirds or fifths or any measurable quantity, because random means it's out of my control. It means that I trust the contractor to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And then if they make a mistake, it's like, oh, you said random. Like, that's random. That tile fit there. It was good for me. And like, I can see how we'll probably have less waste of tiles, like, less cutting, less work, but also there's less control for me. And that scares me. Yeah. Like, that makes me nervous that they're going to lay it and I'm going to go, I hate it. Yeah. Like, I have no measurable, quantifiable quality control over the tile.
Predictable.
Yeah.
Right? Because I mean, even with quality control, you don't have that. You just can predict what it's going to look like because we've stated
it's a measurable, expected pattern. But with the random pattern, it's like, we went through this with pavers too, though, at our last house, where pavers, like, you loved the random and we did the random and it worked out totally fine. It looked
amazing.
But it's outside and like I have much less control over that, and like random in my patio versus random in my dining room is a little bit different.
Yeah.
So I like something measurable.
So
how do I communicate random and then they start and I'm like, not that random? Like how does that work?
So here's maybe something that you're not considering is that when you have the planks, it's not like they're cutting every plank. It's just when this row starts with this row, it's just starting at a different height. And then you have full planks all the way across the floor. all the way down the floor until you get to the end again. And the next row you start at just a different height. And so it's not like you're going to have short pieces and long pieces. It's always going to be long pieces next to long pieces. It's just where the grout lines line up.
So
it's like
your main reason for your context, your main determining emotion behind your choice is that you don't want it to be too predictable.
No, it's not even about predictability. I don't want there to be a pattern in the grout, because I think that the in those situations the grout becomes a feature, and that's it. It's just the aesthetic. So I haven't thought about cost. I haven't thought about time. I haven't thought about number of. I haven't thought of any of that. I can envision like a brick wall where you can just see the very clear grout outlines, and it's like, I would like it to look more like wood, even though it's not wood, right? To just be, that's it. And it's not even that strong of a feeling. It's just, that is all that's there.
So then if you had to pick between thirds and fifths, which would you choose?
100% thirds.
All right. And if you had to pick between thirds and randoms, like what's your percentage split?
Ooh, good question. So this is real decision-making happening in the Bailey household. This is how it happens. I would probably... I would probably lean towards random 70-30.
Ooh, that's more than I thought.
Maybe 60-40.
Wow. That's more than I thought.
And maybe there might be a secret third option where it's like thirds, but just not right. So there may be a way to do it that way where it's thirds differently.
And when you look, when I Google like floor patterns, it only shows it in smaller sequences. So I'm not seeing those grout lines that you're talking about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I really don't care if the grout lines are seen as a feature or not. So that's not remotely something I think of. No.
Yeah. So I think the cool thing about this is kind of understanding this, and this process comes from the book Crucial Conversations, which is, somewhere over here in the red section.
In the reds, it's right there.
There it is.
Ka-chow.
Ka-chow. It goes through this idea of when a group comes together or a pair comes together and they have all of their meaning, not just the information, but the meaning behind it in the pool of, they call it the pool of information, then now we can make a better decision together, and we're less likely to feel disappointed with the decision because we actually got to share all that's in there. And so, like, yes, I would still like that, but I think that if we, once we look at the images or whatever, and you say, oh, I get that, I think I'd still like the predictability because that makes sense to me. Like, I know you, so I understand that makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
And so I think that knowing how it affects you, like, I don't want to put you through like hell, like during the entire laying process, like, oh, I hope it's right, and we're paying a lot of money for that, right? And so I wouldn't want to put you through that. So I think that wherever we end up,
well, and I don't want to be like sitting there staring over the guy's shoulder like every step of the way, because once it's down, it's down.
Right.
It's done.
Right. I mean, we could rip it up again, start over. But.
Yeah, that's not happening. And like I appreciate that you're telling me that the grout is something that you considered so deeply, because I don't really care about the grout. I totally care about the tile.
Think about the backsplash in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Remember, that was a big, like, the grout is going to be a feature. Like, I don't want it too dark. It's going to be a feature. And it went up there, and it's like, oh, I noticed the grout.
Yeah,
it's very
way more than I did.
Yeah.
That's true. All right,
Yeah.
I can see that.
So let's put a pin in it.
Okay.
After we're done recording the podcast, we'll look at some images and just see what that could look like.
All right. I was hoping we'd come to an actual decision, just because,
well, I don't,
I'm a get it done kind of girl.
Yeah, I know you are. So we'll just go with thirds. Random. I love
oh my gosh.
All right.
Hilarious.
So this idea of context is a big deal. It's a big deal because we don't spend enough time talking about context. And there was a decision we've been trying to make for a while here with our winter vacation plans. We've blocked off 3.5-4 weeks from our work calendar. Like, the kids are going to be off, we're going to be off. And last year we went as a family to Eastern Oregon, and we rented a cabin with a bunch of families came together.
20-some family members.
It was wonderful. And we skied and we did ski lessons, and it was wonderful. And so we're like, okay, what are we going to do this year? And
well, and I think the premise was like that was going to be a new tradition for the family.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily feel comfortable with that.
Yeah,
now.
we've been kind of in the planning phases for a couple of months now. Like, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? And like every time we start the conversation, it never really gets to a completion phase.
Stalls out.
And this past week, we really kind of got into it and said, you know what? What is the context? What are we kind of bristling against here? And it was like, it's not quite safe to get a bunch of people together yet, especially a bunch of people from around the country.
Yeah.
And because there's different pop-ups here and there, and we've working so hard on kind of keeping our bubble,
maintaining the bubble,
and because we don't know what the long-term effects of COVID are. Like we know, we've read stories that people are having long-term heart issues and vascular issues, and so we're keeping our bubble, and we realize that the reason that we've never been able to, the context is, it's not quite. It doesn't fit yet in our world, and so.
Well, like even just like the logistics of a 1-day drive location versus a 2-day drive location, like that throws a whole other set of wrench in the plans, and like for the family members that are working and that they're much more exposed, working outside of the house as opposed to we're able to do everything from home, and then going to school versus doing homeschool online. There's just so many varying degrees that when you try to bring it all together, how do you comfort everybody's, or not comfort, whatever,
recognize,
like
accommodate,
comfort.
No, not comfort, but comfort. You really okay?
Coddle, I don't know, whatever. How do you care for each individual person's comfort level? That's why the word comfort kept coming out. But anyways, like how do we make sure that we're nurturing what each person desires and needs, and we're not forcing people into, or out of their comfort zone.
Do it this way, do it that way.
Yeah, just because, our desire to carry on this brand new tradition that we just started, and our desire to be together after so long, and our desire to, let the kids go have these memories together. And I think that there's some fear over like, when can we do it again? Like, how long is it going to be? And so
it seems like it's been forever already.
So like trying to navigate through all of that, and the thing that the uncomfortable thing that no one wants to say is the context of like, oh, that's a little bit outside my comfort zone. Oh, that's a little bit of stretch for me here. Oh, that's a little bit of stretch. And like, nobody really wants to vocalize that because it is a little bit uncomfortable to say like, well, your family does this and mine doesn't, or we're going to have to drive for 2 days and everyone else is going to be a couple of hours, like there's so many added layers of context that until you get them out on the table, we were just going hemming and hawing for a month. I mean, back and forth over what to do.
Yeah. And then as soon as we got it on the table, everyone's like,
doesn't make sense.
That doesn't make sense. And so we'll put in a pin in it so that when we do it again, everyone can be there. Like that's the whole idea is like, if we just let it go right now and, kind of sacrifice this one, then it increases the likelihood that everyone can come to the next one.
Yeah.
And once we got that context out on the table, it's like, oh, okay, it's a bummer. But everyone's like, oh, I feel good with that because now we're all considering the same we're discussing the same context.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting just how much context plays into decision making, how much it plays into conversations, and like, we talked about nonverbals, we talked like all of these things, and there's so much of communication is in the context, and even like context that has nothing to do with you can affect you, right? So if I have a really bad facilitation or Zoom call or meeting or something, and I go out and like, that's still on me, right? That context is still around me. And then all of a sudden, like I'm like projecting. I'm shorter at you. I'm more frustrated. This thing bothers me. The kids bother me, right? And that has nothing to do with your body language, right? And it's like, that's just context that I'm carrying with me. And it's like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm exhausted from, 8 hours of Zoom meetings today. And thank you for telling me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And I think that goes into even some of the customer service experiences that we get. We went to In-N-Out tonight. We drove through, and when we first got to the drive-through, the girl was
Oh my gosh.
obviously frazzled, or she was not her normal In-N-Out like, "Hi, what can I get for you?"
She's like,
Yeah, like she rolled her eyes a little exasperated, a little exhausted, and you were like, "Is
Are
everything
you
okay?"
okay?
Yeah. And then she was like, "Oh yeah, like the car before you, they work here," and like you could tell like they'd had some sort of an interaction. And then she totally got like out of it once she got it off her chest, and like was like, "All right, what can I get for you?" And then she was super friendly and kind. And I feel like that with it happened to us at Lowe's once, where they had just come from a really stressful situation, and then they're trying to come to you and be like, "Hi, what can I do for you?"
Yeah.
And it's like
They're not feeling
mentally,
it,
mentally they're not remotely there. So even in like your customer service stuff, it's like once you get that context, and I think it's one of the things, the story I'm telling myself, and even, something that we can try to do for each other is I've been practicing is like the story I'm telling myself, give you the benefit of the doubt, is that you had a horrible day, you're exhausted, you're tired, whatever 100 different stressful things that you're juggling in your mind. So when you come out and I'm talking to you and I'm getting like the yep, yep, it's like, okay,
Like he's
like
somewhere else.
he's not there, and sometimes it's almost harder for me to dive into it and be like, can you please give me context? And you're like, not really, like I don't want to, like I'm trying to get away from that. I don't want to get back into it because then you've got to recount all the things that are putting you in that mental space. So like I feel like, yes, context is so good, and also I feel like just like give some people some grace,
right? And that's,
give a little bit of extra space and some extra grace, right?
That's entirely the point, because so many times, like what is the story you could tell? Like, so I come out and you're trying to tell me something really exciting, and I'm just like, right? Because I'm so
and
excited.
it's like, you don't care about this,
Yeah.
you don't care about that. You're totally,
right. And so the context in your mind, the story is a context, right? And so the story you're telling is like, you're being a jerk to me right now. Or like that woman at the In-N-Out at the drive-thru with the little clipboard, ticket, right? And like, oh, she's mean, right? Oh, she's not good at customer service. Like that's absent the context, we make up our own stories.
We do. We fill in those gaps.
Fill in the gaps. And it's like we have an opportunity to give them, exactly. So give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, give them a story that doesn't make them a villain, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so easy for us to do that. He did that because he's a, right? And if we did that differently, it fundamentally changes things.
I would never make you a villain, ever. You're my superhero. You're my Superman.
I appreciate that so much. that is never the case, that I'm not a jerk, that I'm not a...
Ever.
Yeah, goodness gracious. No, but...
Oh, man. I'm sorry.
You do it a lot.
I say it, and then in the moment, like, all the emotions hit, and it's like, hello, check in. Come on, come back. Like, you came out of the office. Like, I want your attention now. So I hear it. I said it. I'm the one who brought it up. I will work on it a little bit here and there when I can.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, this whole idea of context and meaning is something that I wish we spent more time on, right? Because there's just so much to it. Yeah. Like, we talk about this idea of nature and nurture, and we talk about like all these different ways in which the world is different based on the context. And so there's this thing. So I read this article, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and it talks about how wealthy families discuss things and things they discuss versus middle class or lower class or everybody else discusses things. And there's the big issue is that the big thing that's different is the way they talk about money. And so wealthy families, they talk about money with their children, and money is a tool to achieve something. And to most of us, the way we grew up, money's a burden
or
and
taboo.
something you don't talk about because money's always tight, it's always short, and you don't want to put someone in the position where they have to acknowledge that their money is short. And so you just don't talk about money. And it's really interesting because in this article they talked about how wealthy families, because they talk about money, they end up learning a lot more about money, and their children learn a lot more about money and how money works as a tool, and then they're able to make more money.
Interesting.
And that's this idea. So the context around them is that money is something, it's a thing you talk about. It's like, what kind of hammer do you have?
Yeah.
Right? It's exactly that. And for most of us, the context around money is, don't talk about it. It's off limits. It's rude.
Well, and I think that there's a lot of shame in, I feel like everybody has financial goals, and maybe, you're hitting most of them, but maybe you're not. And maybe there's areas where in your budgeting, you think you're going to do this and you end up doing that, or, repairs and car repairs and everything else that comes up along the way, the wrenches that get thrown at you. And it's difficult to acknowledge mistakes that we've made in life, but especially with money. And the times where we wanted to take the vacation, or you wanted to do something, and it wasn't a wrench, it was like or you weren't dodging the wrench, you were throwing the wrench. You were like, I don't even care right now. Like, we're going on this vacation. We deserve it. We earn it. There's so many varying degrees, but I just feel like it's one of the big things that we've been trying to get out of our comfort zone and break that cycle for the sake of our kids. Totally not yes, for us, we want to learn more about it. We want to prepare for retirement, whatever that looks like. We want to do estate planning. We want to do all of these things that we know nothing about, essentially. I mean, we're learning as we go. And hopefully get to a spot where when our kids are, we already talk with them about money as much as we can, and, help them understand certain decisions that we make, and, where we stand on, how we'd like to manage our money and how we'd like to prioritize things financially. But I think that just getting to that space where it's acceptable. And here's a fun little story. So we just moved, a couple months ago, and we were able to meet our new neighbors next door, a super awesome couple. And, she came over and introduced herself, and then we got on a little group text thing going. And one of the first conversations we had was about pay equity between, genders.
Gender equity, yeah.
The gender equity gap. And it was like, wow, this went from 0 to 60, whereas there are friends I've had for a lifetime that I've never been able to, not been able to, but
never have.
That's never come up, and it was
Shout out to Ryan, because we know he listens to the podcast. So,
but it was a huge accelerator. I felt emotionally, and we barely know each other other than high over the wall and highs, from the front door to the sidewalk. But it felt like such a deeper connection, because it went to the space where it was wow, okay, this is something that we can talk about. It's okay to acknowledge that this is a tool, and it's something that it exists. I mean, we can all talk about it. We can acknowledge it. And I think that the more that we let those guards down, the barriers down, the shame, the taboo factor, no matter where you sit financially. I mean, it doesn't have to be that only the wealthy people do it.
Right.
If we can have everybody get talking about it openly, we can lift each other up. We can help each other. Did you, coveting coupons? Dude, have you heard about this deal? Have you heard about this coupon? Have you heard about this sale? Or whatever else. There's so many ways to talk about money and keep it in the open, as opposed to hiding it behind closed doors and not letting other people into the knowledge, hoarding all the knowledge about it.
Well, so here's something really interesting, and this is an idea that I heard before. I don't remember where I heard it, but there are organizations out there that have open pay, which means that any employee can see the salary of any other employee.
Wow.
And
I've never heard of that.
Guess what they don't have?
Gender gap?
Gender gap. They don't have a gender pay gap. You know why? Because everyone can see everyone else's salary.
Yeah.
And it's all of a sudden you take that veil off, and it's wait a minute.
Yeah.
I'm noticing a pattern here. And all of a sudden it's out in the open. Those patterns don't have a chance to exist, because they love the hiding and silence. And you think about that, if we were open about money, we were open about mortgages, we're open about these sorts of things, people would be able to share and learn information so much faster. And we may see some of these kind of bigger issues starting to fade away, right? The discrepancy between the poor and the rich is unbelievable.
And the discrepancy from the middle class to the rich is unbelievable.
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Incomprehensible.
Yeah, it is.
So Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, just those two men, two people, two humans on this planet, made more money during this current recession than the entire, like, then it was like the number was like then like 20 million Americans or more than that. Like they made a combined like $30 billion. It's like, it's incomprehensible how much money that is.
It is
incomprehensible.
Yeah.
And it's like they could pay for an entire 4 years of college for 2 million Americans.
Oh my gosh.
Like that, right? That's
it's crazy. It's crazy when you think about like the actual numbers and what that actually looks like. And I just think honestly, like letting go of the shame and letting go of like feeling like keeping up with the Joneses or, you know, whatever. If you let go of that, and if we talked about it openly, everybody would realize like we all have our areas and our places where we're still trying to figure it out, and we're trying to, you know, get to the spot that we want to be. And maybe there would be some accountability in there. Like it might even be where, you know, like, hey, you told me that you were saving up for this. How's that going? You know, and just being able to talk a little bit more openly about where you're at in your financial goals and stuff like that as an accelerator in, you know, your own financial status, in the financial status of, you know, the people that you get to talk about it with, and then also just in your own, you know, well-being, financial well-being and mental well-being, instead of confining yourself in this box and saying like, I should have this, I should do that, I should do this, I should do that. Like letting go of all of that and just being like, okay, here's where I'm at. Here's what I'm working on. What are you working on? All right. What can I learn? What can I use? And just, you know, figuring it out as a community coming together. Yeah. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. You know, what you said a few times is what would it look like if there was no shame around it? Like, I mean, we talked about Brene Brown last week, and it's like, that's her whole big deal is how much shame we carry and how we behave given that shame. And it's like, if we had one less thing to be ashamed of or to have shame around, like we would just be freer. Like her whole thing is live wholeheartedly. And if we didn't have shame around money, or didn't have shame around what car we drove, or, you know, the time that I ran out of gas in a Prius, or those times, right? Like, if we didn't have shame, like all of a sudden we could just be more full. And I think that's just one of the ideas that would just change things, right? So we write in the book, like if you change your context, you change your outcomes. Yeah. Because if the context around something is not the same, then the thing is not, the experience of the thing is not the same. Yeah. And you know, I don't know if you experienced this, you know, in your travels, but when I went to Mexico, I did my homestay in Mexico. I had taken one semester of beginner Spanish. Yeah. And I was told, like, going to the program, that, you know, the host family, they're going to speak English. Don't worry about it. And I was like, okay, so ¿dónde está el baño? Like, that was my
baseline
that was my baseline sentence. And lo siento, and, you know, más despacio, por favor, which is slower, please. Like, say it slower again. Right. And so I went there thinking, don't worry, I'm just going on a vacation to Mexico, and the host family's going to speak Spanish or speak English. And guess what? There were 18 kids on this trip, and 17 host families spoke English.
Yours didn't.
Mine didn't. And so like, nice. Me and the host mother, like, we were just sitting there, like, staring at each other the first day that we were there, and
grunts and points.
Yeah, and she was so sweet because she knew I was coming from America. She made me a hamburger, and it was the sweetest thing. And she said hamburguesa, and like, I got that, like, I know what that means. And so we just kind of sat and we kind of worked it out, and all of a sudden my context changed. And in that 1 month, I learned more Spanish, and I retained it deeper than in all of my years of taking Spanish in school, because my context was different and my outcomes were different. After 2 weeks, I actually started dreaming in Spanish.
That's crazy.
It was really weird. Like, you don't think about what language you dream in, right? Your context is English. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, my context changed, and everything, my experience of everything changed. And I think that when we think about how that could impact our parenting, impact our relationship, impact our politics, right? Is if we change the context from they're the enemy, if they change the context from our kids are a disaster, or, right, they're always fighting each other, right? If we change that context, and it's like, perfect example. There are a lot of folks right now that are feeling trapped by staying at home or things being closed or working from home or whatever. They're feeling trapped. Going back to school, I feel trapped. My kids feel trapped. It's a burden. And that's the context. Mm-hmm. And the experience comes out of that context. And if we found a way to change that context, the environment physically wouldn't change, which is how we think about the stories we're telling. And it's like, all right, we are in a once in a lifetime moment in time where we get to learn how to use our computers differently, where we get to play more board games together, where we get to teach our kids how to cook, where we get to work on our relationship on a podcast, right? So like all these, if we gave a different context around it, I wonder how many people would feel differently through, because COVID's not, like, the pandemic is not going to go, like by definition, like a certain number of countries need to have like 0 cases for that to say, okay, the pandemic is over. And like back in June, I think the CDC said, or someone from CDC or WHO or something said that it's likely the pandemic, the official pandemic, is going to last halfway through 2021. Like, they said that back in June.
Wow.
And it's like, we're just waiting for it to go away. And like, oh, it'll go back to normal soon. And like, we've been saying that, right? So our context is it's going to go away soon. It's going to go away. And guess what? It hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
Right? And so we keep bumping up against this context that keeps letting us down, and we're getting more and more disappointed. And like, what would it look like if we changed that context?
Yeah. And I think, not to take away from all the amazing things you just said, but I do want to acknowledge that we have an extreme place of privilege.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So yes, we have an ability to change our context, and maybe not everybody has that.
Right.
And I do think that that's really, really an important piece of context as well.
Yes.
To make sure that we acknowledge in there.
Yes.
That we are able to go online and work remotely at home and all of those things, and not everybody has that ability.
Fair.
So I want to make sure to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
However, that being said, there is still a number of layers within each person's life where they can try to frame that context. And right. I hear the deeper message of what you are saying. Yeah. Completely.
Yeah. You know, as you're saying that, like, I immediately thought of Life is Beautiful. Right. So if you haven't seen Life is Beautiful, grab a box of tissues and watch that movie. Like, it is a wonderful movie. But it goes through a father and a son in a concentration camp. And the son has this wonderful experience of playing with his dad. His dad is going through hell. Like the mom is gone, and they're going through this experience, and the dad created this context for the little boy. And maybe it's the optimist in me, right? And I know that I'm optimistic. I see in myself I feel the weight of the time, right? So I feel the weight of really, like, when our kids say, ooh, we get to get out of the car, right? Yeah. Like when we went to get flu shots, right? Like, oh wait, we get to get out? Yeah. Like, oh my God, our kids haven't been out of the car. Like, they barely go in the car, but when they do, like, they never go out of the car. Yeah. And I feel the weight of that. And then there's just every once in a while, like, it's just a spark of beauty. Yeah. And it's like, we're playing a game here. We played Ticket to Ride. We play Ticket to Ride a lot. We played the board game Ticket to Ride, which is an amazing game if you haven't had a chance to play it yet. But last week, 2 weeks ago, Jasmine won.
Yeah. Beat everybody. Really. And the whole time she seemed completely checked out and over the game and like, la-da-da-da-da. And then she killed us.
Yeah. And it's like, it's a little bit of luck, a lot of strategy, a lot of kind of gaming, and she just destroyed everybody. Yeah. And she's 7.
Yeah, our youngest little girl, 7 years old, killed it.
Killed us. And it was one of, like, that was a moment for me. It was like, wow. Like, that wouldn't have happened if not for this period of time of us playing so many board games and her learning. We actually posted a video on Facebook the first time we played.
Yeah, of them crying.
She was
hysterically.
crying. She was crying.
My route got blocked. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like because of that experience, like she grew.
Yeah.
And that was like just a beautiful reminder that we're spending a lot of time together. That's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like there's a lot we can talk about with context.
I'm sure, guaranteed, there definitely is. One piece of context that you briefly touched on is voting, and that is an amazing way to think of the context that drives you to vote. Think of the context that you need, and share it if you feel so inclined about what you're passionate about, what you think affects you. If you are an early ballot person, mail in your ballots, mail them in, drop them in the mail. Get them out, get them going. Deadline is coming up really quickly here in Arizona. I don't know about other states, but vote. Please make sure that you make your voices heard. And the election is coming up quick. So if you don't do the early ballot thing, have a plan. Look at your polling site. Look at the hours. Your work schedules and all of that, and make a plan. Make a plan to make sure that you get out and you get your vote and make your voice heard. That's a really powerful thing that we can all do right now.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. All right. With that, I think we'll tap more next week, probably on of the same topics.
A lot of context.
We ran long, and we still got plenty more to go. So, all right. Have a great week, everybody, and go vote.
Go vote.